Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. All right, boys, I was flying home from Springboard and such a great time. It's a conference for emerging brands, bunch of vendors, bunch of amazing people there. And I thought I need to do a podcast recap with founder of Springboard, one of the founders, Lane Fisher, and then my man, Jeff Herr, who's business partners with me over at Front Street Equity Partners. And probably the first time people have ever heard about Front Street Equity Partners and my involvement with them. So here we are. Let's talk about Springboard, behind the scenes, some side conversations that we all had, some big takeaways, and just a general recap of the whole thing. So Jeff, how long has it been since you were at Springboard? You took a little break, didn't you?
Yeah, man. I want to say the last one I was at was probably 3 years ago, 3 or 4, probably maybe 18. Yeah, 18. It was great to be back. I mean, wow, it's grown like considerably. I think it's grown in all ways too, not just like the audience size, but like the programming part of it, I thought was amazing. I was talking with Lane a little bit, like they're almost like a victim of their own success to the point where I think they had almost like 600 people and they're just like running out of venues. Like you call up a venue and they're like, hey, we want to do a dinner for 600. And it's like, there's only so many of those in town because you also want to keep it cool. I mean, the venues that they had for both nights, the opening night, the next place, the next night at that club, like, holy cow. It's just, I don't know if it would be as cool if all of a sudden you're having something at the convention center. It kind of would lose its spark. So the fact that the hotel was great, the venues were great, met so many cool people. Like, it's also super interesting. I mean, you guys probably know the stats better than me, but I think there's probably 300 or 400 new brands ish that go into franchising on an annual basis. I mean, we've all known like the overall 4,000 ish number total, but it's pretty crazy. I think I've seen everything in the world of franchising until you go to a conference like this, because when you're there, you start talking to some franchisors and they're in a business that is like, I've never even heard of the business. Some of them are in a category that I never knew existed. So it was really kind of eye-opening. We'll talk more about takeaways down the road in this conversation, but I think the coolest part, man, and one of the reasons I love franchising so much is just the passion that comes with franchising. I mean, of course, like founders are going to be passionate about their brand, but seeing how passionate they are about growing that brand, I mean, that's just pretty awesome. And then the passion that comes from all the various vendors, all the various speakers, all the various people that, I mean, even the people that like are on Lane's staff that like put that together, like they were working their tails off and they always had a smile on their face. I really can't think of a conference that I've been to in a long, long time that had that kind of energy. I think there was, what Lane can fill in the details, but I think there was like 200 or 300 different brands represented there or something like that. But it was just cool. And it's almost, I call it dropping a quarter into the jukebox. It's kind of funny when you just open up a conversation with a franchisor and you just say, hey, tell me a little bit about you and your business. And I use the word like a little bit, but man, all of a sudden you just drop that quarter in a jukebox, man. And it's just, the passion comes out. It's like one super long run-on sentence, but they just want to share about their story and who they are. And I don't know, man, it was really cool.
So this is a fun conference, and we'll get into a little bit about like who it's for and kind of why we're talking about it. There's a lot of emerging brands there. There's a lot of vendors there that help franchisors and emerging brands. And then there's some brands that have just been around for a while with founders that are mentors, with founders that, you know, are there to share and have these conversations. Even me, you know, all of us charge a lot of money per hour if somebody wants to get on my calendar for consulting. All three of us do that. But there, like, you're in a room full of people that could charge a ton of money for their time, and they're there to give and to, there's no, at least I haven't been invited to it yet, Lane. Maybe I need to, but the green room, there's no, like, everyone's out and about. There's not this other party that's happening that nobody else gets invited to. And so emerging brands, people that are thinking about franchising, franchisees, if you're part of a young brand, your founder should be there to be around other founders. So anyway, that's my take on Springboard. But Lane, why don't you just fill in some blanks that Jeff and I missed and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate Eric, the opportunity and Jeff the opportunity to talk. I didn't want to interrupt Jeff because Jeff had so many kind words. I didn't know how I would, in my own self-impression, looking in the mirror, come out with a better report card. But we had 568 people sign up, which is a world record for us. We had 400 people sign up as franchisors. We had so many private equity companies that own franchisors, that operate platform companies, that it was just an incredibly experienced bunch. And, you know, people always are trying to get decision makers out and trying to get the founders and the CEOs out, but they came out in droves. One of the most impressive thing about it was sort of the titles across the board at the folks participating. It wasn't, some events you delegate to the person who's the subject matter expert of the event and the founders or the principals don't go, but we had very, very little of that here. You alluded to something I'm so very proud of, which is this duty or willingness of folks to pay forward. Many of our transactional founders, people who entered into liquidity events with PE firms or whoever, are all former Springboarders, or many of them were. And when we, called in the chips, if you will, to get folks to come and tell their story and share it, we were just going right to the same family tree that we go for everything else. And people were more than happy to say, and it makes my heart warm every time I hear somebody say it, that they met some extremely meaningful person at one of our events, either at our Springboard event or at our Ski on conference. And that person people ended up being incredibly integral to the good things that happened to that brand later. There are so many people like Jeff that are, that think we've seen it all. And then you see something that's an anomaly, and you see something that has an incredibly productive risk reward proposition, or something that's not characteristic of what we otherwise see, or people that have taken a service down to, like, microcosm is a weird word, but I mean down to the most narrow delivery, whether you're coating garage floors instead of being just a general contractor, specializing in that and really maximizing, the lift from common, multi-unit ownership and brand operation and growing very quickly that way is astounding to me and impressive. I know Jeff and I have had this conversation. You and I have too, Eric. It's just incredible how productive, very discreet people, business models can be when people know who they are. And they're not trying to be everything to everybody. They're trying to serve a narrow audience, which is frankly giant in terms of consumers of their products. So like Jeff, I pinch myself with the number of new people that I meet on every turn. There are some events you go to where there's 19 people from the same vendor, you know what I mean, that you meet at every turn. And we're very parochial, obviously, about who comes and about the experience that our Springboarders have had with those vendors. And so those are all people that have a huge heart, like the rest of us, that may have been on the franchisor side or before being a vendor, or are doing what they can to bring out and to spread the word about Springboard and try to really, we've never made money at this. This was always just a forum to allow folks to associate with like-minded people that were on the same mission and to talk to people that were a lot and way ahead of them in the food chain. I must have repeated that like a million times, but that's really what the goal is, so that they can network with people like we were talking about, Dan Dizio from Philly Pretzel, or just other people that have been there and done that. Everybody, it seems like everybody you meet in franchising when you're emerging is ahead of you, and that may be the case, but they all may be just ahead of you, or you know, as they scale their own, you know, inflection points and other, you know, scale their model. But it's amazing the amount of sharing and amazing the amount of collaboration, even among competitors in the same business, about sort of the common things that we all are dealing with. And Springboard is always a place for no secrets. Sometimes you go and people allude to everything, but never actually tell you anything. And Springboard is always that place where you know that nobody can put to work the super secret stuff that you know in time enough to be any kind of threat to you. So just by giving it out and sharing the super secret stuff, as we always call it, it just saves somebody else the pitfalls. You know, Rocco Fiorentino always says we don't live necessarily long enough to, we can't live long enough to make every mistake on our own. So we're forced to learn from the mistakes of others. But Springboard is the place where that happens. And I just have constantly people pulling me aside and sort of telling me sort of that fact. And lastly, I'll say that the reviews for Springboard have come back. Not only like I liked it 1 through 5, but it was the most amazing thing ever, or that this, I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute. I'll let Jeff talk about his particular session, but our unorthodox approach to trying to impart the basic knowledge and tools of franchising took a turn this year as we took some risks in gamifying it, but people were incredibly captivated by that. Jeff, you haven't seen all the reviews that I've seen, but people were captivated by our, not to pivot or use words that everybody else used, but we tried something different and we went out on a huge risk that would have been much riskier had we not brought you back to chair it. But I'll let you sort of tell folks what we did, and then we can talk more about it if that's okay with Eric.
Yeah, man, that was good. Yeah, I want to chat that up. I was going to ask you one question quickly though, because I think you guys talked a little bit about it in the very first session, but this was the 10th anniversary, which is pretty awesome. Like, talk a little bit about like the genesis of this, because did you guys do an unconference before Springboard? Like, how did it all come about?
So it did.
And how many people came to the first one?
The first Springboard had well under 100 people. We were hoping to get, to exaggerate the number to say 100. I think we were happy if we would have gotten, anywhere near that. The genesis was that we did a ski, and still do, a ski event in Park City every year, that we have a great following and a refresh every year as new folks and new brands join us. There is a correlation between decision makers and folks who can authorize a ski trip that is not all programming, right? We do most of our programming in the morning, and then a lot of the work is done on the networking side as people ski and spend the day. But we've done that. We've always done that. We have a huge following for that. We were actually at the unconference when the NBA was canceled. Everybody remembers that moment of COVID. You knew it was for real. And we just by happenstance or by scheduling had 150 people away that all dealt with that emergency at the same moment. And many of the smaller brands really had no plan and really were in denial with the rest of us in terms of what COVID really meant. And so the fact that folks rolled up their sleeves and developed an action plan and were issuing communications right out of unconference was just fortuitous that we had everybody together. They were incredibly grateful about it in the 2020 year. But I guess 10 years ago, I said, I love that we have people coming together. I love the educational side of it, but we really needed a place and a platform to help educate emerging brands. And we needed something that was less of a frolic and detour like skiing is sometimes interpreted, and something that was more wall-to-wall programming, but trying to give people who are, at the entry level of franchising that the kind of subject matter that's relevant to them. So it's getting the initial units open and digital marketing and all those things was the original plan. And then, where all the great information is right there among the attendees. We never bring in speakers from the outside because we never have to, because the best stories of overcoming these obstacles are always in the room. That's right. If you know enough and you're immersed enough into your people and subject matter. So really just Brad and I got a huge amount of credit for creating what was really just a venue, but that everybody came to and exchanged all their, all their information, trying to lift the next guy up in a way that I don't see happening in other industries or other business models, that people do truly care about the folks coming up behind them, either to help them from a misstep that is easily avoidable, but also to avoid, government intervention from folks sort of doing this things not eyes wide open. Sometimes people are surprised about things that Jeff and Erik, we know, are foreseeable, and we know that you'd expect to happen in any context.
Yeah, it's good that you guys touch on that and the impact that, joining IFA and being a part of IFA and being kind of in the game. So many people just think about franchising as awarding territories, opening stores, grand openings, different categories, all the other pieces. And they forget that this is a highly regulated industry. And what makes it even tougher is it's regulated at the federal level, obviously through the FTC, but then it's also super regulated on a state by state basis even. And keeping up with that is a challenge. It really is a challenge. And it's so fluid. I mean, rules can change on a dime. And just kind of having access, at least knowing people that can share with you how things are changing so that you can try to get ahead of the curve. I think it's great, man. I think it's really great. Yeah. So let's chat it up a little bit about like our session.
Well, hold on. So if nobody is watching this on video, then you probably saw that I disappeared. And what you guys didn't know, I'm interviewing for my next co-host. So you guys, I'm going to go back, review this to see who is going to be my next co-host on the Franchise Secrets podcast. So who do you think it will be, Lane or Jeff?
I mean,
Jeff's a pretty good co-host.
My computer died. You guys kept it going. First time it's ever happened on a podcast. So I'm looking forward to going back and listening to my own podcast to see how it was when I was gone. So here's the deal with the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. It's full of a bunch of successful franchisees across many different industries, many different brands, and you get to be a part of that. Now, if you've had any level of success in franchising, you've probably been around top performing Z's in your current brand. So think about that. And if you could do that with 40 plus different brands, industries, franchisees, that's the value in the mastermind. I bring in some of the best speakers in the world. We talk about some topics that will never be talked about anywhere else. So if you're interested in being a part of a group like that, check out franchisetribe.com. So Jeff's co-hosting. Keep it going, man.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of talking about how the genesis of the whole thing and how many people came to the first one. It's great. I can't wait to see how it continues to evolve too. But
Jeff, tell them the story the way you told it from the stage in terms of how I harangued you with this.
Yeah. So excited to kind of come back to Springboard, and Lane called me up and said, "Hey, let's kind of figure out a session. Like let's talk about franchise development." He said, I'm thinking you and Carrie from Fastlane, and let's kind of do something different. Because look, there's only so many formats you can do with a session, right? Whether somebody's just a solo speaker or you have a moderator and a panel, round table stuff. I mean, there's only so many different ways to play it. And my personality is to always attack life, have fun with it. When I was growing up, my mom always said, Jeffrey, fun's where you find it. And how I've kind of leveraged that through my career is that you try to make something memorable. Because if it's memorable, then people will talk about it. They'll remember it. They'll share it. I mean, if you think about like how you market today, social media, digital, whatever it is, you're just trying to get people's attention. That's hard enough. But if you get their attention, you got to keep their attention. And content delivery in a world that is like everybody seems to have ADD, like you have to have some attention grabbing content, and it has to you want it to be rewarding. In other words, you don't want it to be all fluff. Like you want to deliver real nuggets. Like anybody goes to a session or conference, like they want nuggets, right? They're never going to remember everything. But if there's a couple pieces that are meaningful and impactful, then they're going to take that. They're going to share with their team. They're going to implement it into their business. That's what it's really all about. So we were just kind of spitballing. I don't even know. I think Lane came up with the overall concept of, could we make it kind of fun? Could we kind of gamify it? Right now, I have 3 daughters. So like, there's no games in our house. Like there's no Sega, or I don't even know what the game companies are these days. But so like gamifying is, my life's a game, dude. But I'm not into the whole game thing, but I kind of liked where he was going. Now, this is where we might differ. In my mind, I was the one that threw out Family Feud, but maybe Lane did. Lane definitely said, let's gamify it. So
let's just settle on as a mutual. I think
it was mutual. We spontaneously said it at the exact same time in history.
But I threw out there the game show thing, and then you said we do a game show.
Game show. Yeah.
Feud, and I was like, and suddenly Jeff knew, from not knowing anything about game shows or gamifying, became like the authority on Family Feud.
That got me excited, man. If I get excited about, man, it's something, like I'm a dog on a bone. So that was kind of the first conversation. So we kind of had this concept. So then we kind of started setting up like a series of phone calls, kind of bring the gang together, some of the team from Lane's squad, at Springboard, bring in like Carrie, so we could start kind of spitballing the idea.
I really to say, Carrie was all in on Family Feud, and in fact,
yes,
she was so effusive about it because they play it at their holiday dinners, and she knows what relatives are. Like she knew all about it, and she's much more organized than anyone else on the call.
Oh, man, she organized. Yeah, like Carrie and I are similar in terms of like end result, but how we get there there could be 2 different paths. She's awesome. So like all of a sudden, man, we're having like all these calls. Then there's this email thread. I might have to save this one forever, man. It's like this thing, there must have been 900 responses to this thing. And like, I'm just kind of a fly by the seat of my pants guy. Like once an email thread gets past more than like 6 or 7 responses, like I can't really like click back in and figure, okay, now I got to respond to all of these. So anyway, long and short of it was, we were going to pretty much follow the general format of Family Feud, which obviously everybody that's ever going to watch this has seen at least one episode, no matter what the host was. But the idea was set up 2 teams and come up with a list of questions, play to 300 points, and then do the lightning round, right? Where you try to get to 200 points and you have, 2 players from the winning team of the preliminary round. So like we were basically following the general gist, but I think where it got kind of cool and where it also added a lot of value was the fact that in between each, we spent a lot of time trying to curate the right questions. At first, we kind of started going down a path of let's keep it super light, let's make it fluffy. Then we said, no. This has we gotta have some nuggets that we deliver, right? So then we kind of swing to the other side where then it kind of got a little too starchy for our taste. And then we ended up just like anything else, right in the middle, and it turned out great. So what made it kind of cool though was we would play the game, do a question, but the panel was really good. The panel meaning both teams. So we had 3 people on each team versus, Family Feud has 5, but having 10 people would have been too much. So it was perfect. We had 3 people for each team, all with a great background in franchise development but from different perspectives. One was a franchisor that happens to do his own franchise development. One was JT, one of the captains. Like, he's done like 3,000 budget blinds and other concepts. One of the gals worked on for an FSO. One of the gals came from franchise development. Now she's president of a new emerging brand. So it was kind of a cool, it was the teams were set up right. So the questions were curated right. The teams were curated right. And so in between each question, where we were playing the feud, we would then kind of do some Q&A with the panelists about that issue. So whether it was around, things to keep your eye out around certain candidates, what they say, what they do, or, what are the most important pieces of an FDD? There was questions, just really the questions were all around how to build a system, what's franchise, what's important when you're putting together franchise development. But then the where we kind of hit the pause button in between each question and spent some time talking to the panel about their thoughts about that subject. I think that's where it came, very educational. But at the end of the day, where I think we won was I got to hand it to you guys, Lan. We went all out on the production value. We had to this point, Eric, I don't know if I told you this. So some guy who lives in Baltimore created like the Family Feud software, right? So basically, it's like an online software. So you can basically, you can play Family Feud in your house with your family or something. It has the real music. It has the sound where it's like, somebody gives an answer and it like clicks off, or it's like ding. It's got the buzzers when they answer when their answer's not on the board. I mean, it's like so legit. So from a production value, here's how legit Lane and his team were. The guy that actually created that software, Lane brought him in to run the show behind the stage with the software that he developed. So if that doesn't give you some details around, like, we really wanted this to feel like it was the feud, and be super legit, but then also be super fun. Carrie and I kind of played off each other. Now
we're talking about Carrie from Franchise Fastlane.
Carrie from Franchise Fastlane was she came out initially and introduced the teams. She introduced how the game was going to be played. She's so articulate. I mean, she really nails every single syllable in a word. But she just kind of set the tone. And then she announced that the host was going to be me. And Lane, the other little sidebar piece about what was funny about setting this up was we had so many calls, we had so many emails, we had so many texts about this, right? So it was like, wow, this better be good, because we've buttoned up everything. But after every single call and like every night, Lane would text me late at night. He's like, dude, what are you wearing? What are you going to wear? So I was going to be the host, right? I'm like the Richard Dawson, Steve Harvey guy. And he's like, what are you going to wear? What are you going to wear? I didn't want to let him down, man. Like, and I had somebody go out and get a couple of like leisure suits, and they were just like your straight up like navy. And I'm like, one was powder blue. I'm like, that's not my color. But yeah, I was kind of freaked out because Lane was nervous and anxious about making sure that like I dialed it in for the outfit. And so I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. So finding like a really good vintage store, it's not New York City. Like, it's hard to find. But I found this one, and I went in, and I think I pulled it off pretty good. It was colorful. It was like 100% polyester. So in the lights, man, it was like I was like one of those rotisserie chickens, just sweating. But yeah, so I got the outfit, came out, and just tried to spitball it the best as possible. I mean, I think where hosts kind of make it fun is, they kind of make fun of the answers that the contestants have. And, you never know how they're going to answer the question. So it's like, you can't just sit in a room and write jokes about how you're going to respond to how somebody answers to a question. You don't even know how they're going to answer it. So you just have to kind of fly off the cuff, which that's probably one of the good things I'm all right at. And so when these, and trust me, there was plenty of opportunity to kind of riff off of these people's answers too. So I'm excited for people to be able to see that session. I think it was rewarding. I think it was super fun. It was totally outside the box, but we did spend a lot of time kind of curating the production around this thing and making sure everybody knew all the details and how it's going to flow. And I mean, there was good sessions there, but I'm going to go down by saying that was the best session there. So that's my take. I seem to kind of always, whenever I come on Erik's podcast, he'll ask me a question and I'll talk for 20 minutes. So let me pass the torch over to Lane and get his perspective from the audience.
Yeah, I mean, look, people are saying to me, it was perfectly, one of the quotes on the survey, the post survey is, it was perfectly imperfect. Right? You ask people a question, you ask anybody in franchising a question, what's the best lead source? They can't give you a 2-word answer. In fact, Jeff made fun of that going through because there was only room for 2 words on the board, but yet people would give a paragraph answer as they did when they replied. So compiling the answers, because we really did the survey to our entire database and really collected the answers back and compiled them and organized them. And so there was a degree of realism to them, but it was perfectly imperfect, right? It was not intended, but I would say the changeover between the learning part of it and the back to the game show, which to me was going to be a challenge in terms of transitioning from serious to less serious and back and forth, was executed so perfectly. I mean, it was one cohesive thing from beginning to end. Nobody got up and left the room. There wasn't one person with cell phone glow on their face, on their glasses from paying attention to anything else. They were waiting to see what was next, from the way Jeff acted, how he managed the stage that had to be a quarter mile. It was a little, we're improvising. Yeah. We had risers in the places we had them anyway, but Jeff was, going between the risers and with just kept everybody's attention. It was, I think, the best delivery of a non-traditional educational session that I've ever done. And it showed the kind of potential for doing these things later. I mean, the problem was when you ask people, this is a 101 basics Springboard U kind of program. And when you ask people, when they talk about all the things they want, it's never, can you assemble 7 experts to dump the whole load on me in the course of an hour or an hour and a half? It was always the opposite of that. They wanted more opportunity to laugh, to be entertained, and to schmingle and to meet around the people around them. And you need something like this was just an amazing way that had everybody talking to the people, their neighbors, and because nobody had ever seen anything like it and nobody knew what was going to be next. But really fun. And I'm interested in your impression, Erik. How do you think that went?
Dude, it was great. I was going to say, you had so many amazing breakout rooms and sessions, but I wasn't in most of them. Whenever I go to conferences, I'm mostly outside, inside conversations. And that's just who I am and what I do. I was in there for that whole session with Jeff and the Family Feud because it was funny, hilarious, and because there was nuggets along the way. Like, you're always looking for a nugget. You can get stuff out of speech and this, that, and the other. But if you're looking for nuggets through comedy, that was the best session. And there was absolutely nuggets because of the panel. I mean, Lane, you curate these panels. So when you go to a conference, there's a couple of things that you want. You want to talk to people that are in the trenches doing the thing that you want to learn from. And that's what it was on the stage with Family Feud. That's what it is when he has private equity folks, investment bankers, fran dev people, you name it, marketing, social media. His people on these panels doing this thing in the trenches. And so I love to be able to rub shoulders with those types of people and then walk away with some new friends. Like I'm back to my max 5,000 friends on Facebook, and Caleb's going in to start deleting some today so I can add some more that are wanted to be friends from Springboard. And so speaking of that, Lane, you probably don't even know this, but it was Unconference a couple years before COVID. That was my first introduction to your world. And, I didn't really know a lot of people there. And I went to Park City and you and Brad both so warmly welcomed me into the family. Like I couldn't have felt more comfortable in a group of people that I've never really been around before, taking me skiing and like helping me, like the Fishman family, like taking me under their wing, taking me all the places on the slopes. It was an absolute blast. That was years ago. Fast forward today, like we're all friends. And so people listening, if you don't go out and go to conferences, get involved with people in the industry, you're not going to make friends and the connections that you need to make. So it's one, about getting knowledge, and two, about making connections that turn into friendships that like Lane saved me in so many ways. His knowledge, and so is Jeff. Like those two have helped propel me forward in my career in franchising because it's a friendship that I've had with Jeff for many years. I go to franchise broker conference where we first met, and then Lane at the Unconference. So people listening, like give Springboard or the Unconference, put it on your list as must attends. Like that, Jeff and I are mapping out our conference list for this next year. And I don't love to go to a bunch of conferences. I used to, but I don't do that anymore. So I said, Jeff, what are the minimum conferences that we need to attend at Front Street Equity Partners? Because we're looking for brands. We're looking for new brands to advise them and to bring in this FSO piece to them and, capital injection. So we're looking for brands like that out there. But I don't want to go to every conference that there is. And so first two, Springboard and Unconference. Those are two that are on our calendars today. And then the IFA main convention. I've never been there. I can't believe I have. And I was going to go this last year, but I got sick. And so those are the three biggies for us. So I think that says a lot. Attention franchisors, if you are not bringing in many of the right franchisees, sales are slow. It's stealing too much of your time as a founder trying to award franchises to the right franchisee. There's a better way to do it. That's why I started the Franchise Sales Mentor. If you want to have access to the information, the techniques, the ways that the best franchise sales organizations are awarding franchisees, then you might want to check out the Franchise Sales Mentor. The reasons that franchisors join is because they want access. They want access to my Rolodex. They want access to my connections. They want access to shortcut both short-term and long-term success to increase enterprise value to their brand.
Yeah, so now that you said that, I'm just looking up the date. So we did take a pause on Unconference last year. There was a mini one done, but we're back this year, back in Park City from the 22nd to the 26th of March, which was our typical date there. I'm suspecting we'll have a huge crowd because people have been calling and asking about it. And there is something about that sort of extreme networking when you're skiing that sort of brings everybody down to a common level. There's no correlation between being a great franchisor and being a great skier. I have learned over these many years. You can pretty much ambush and catch up to anybody you want to on the ski slope to have those kind of follow-up.
Who's the best skier and worst franchisor? You want to name that person, the worst franchisor and best skier?
There's probably people competing for that, right? They care a lot more about skiing. But that event is, it's people say to me, but I don't ski. I'm like, well, half the people that come don't ski. And a third of the people are new every year. So it's really like, it's just a complete refresh. And when you could ask the same question to the same audience every year, and the answer would be different because different people would be stepping up to share that. And I think newcomers don't realize how generous franchising is in that way and that sharing of information. They think, I'm never getting anything from my competitor, just like, a local competitor, and it's just completely different. And there's people that are, every mistake you're about to make, somebody's already made. And if you have any kind of conversation with anybody, they'll point you in the right direction because mainly for self-preservation and empathy, because they live there and you just, you bang your head on low-hanging stuff. It's just, that other people have seen and you haven't. But I think that people need to invest time in it. We always say that You might be in the 99th percentile of your underlying business, of your operations, but franchising is usually new to folks. And as Jeff says, it's highly regulated and it's easy to misstep, and it's easy to have a really costly consequence of misstepping. So, you know, you hear these concepts over again and over again, and you talk to people that have more experience than you, and they give you a methodology for dealing with it. You talk to people every day about, you know, what makes companies valuable. We had so many private equity firms at this, digress for a minute, at Springboard. And not that everybody wants to sell, but everybody wants to operate their business in a way to maximize value, typically.
Jeff and I were talking about that, like how to scale, how to maximize value. And so many of these brands are doing things the wrong way, from as simple as having the wrong territory sizes. They think their big value prop is big territory. That's their big value proposition. And I was in a number of conversations with you, Jeff, and you're like, no, bigger, better. This is not a huge value proposition, and you're hurting yourself, and you're not really setting up your company to achieve its highest multiple when you eventually sell to private equity. So, Jeff, any comments around that? Because you've had so many brands and you've been around, like you've seen full circle this multiple times, how this has happened with franchisors. So comments on that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.